All right, so when it comes to how you finance your cars, it's a little bit tricky, and there's a couple different levels that you have to think about and deal with when financing cars or purchasing cars, or just some principles to think about in the first place. But I want to just start by realizing the cost of interest, and you probably understand after looking at the last couple videos, but the reality is that I have some things that I want to talk to people about understanding driving the car that's appropriate for their income, right? Because that's a big component. I'm not going to tell you what to do or not do, but I just want to share with you some principles because it's really imperative to understand the cost that that's having. Once again, you can see in your, I should say, the cost that that's having in your life. Once again, you can see here I have the car debt, right, and the principal. That's the, you want to buy a $30,000 car. This is the principal that you owe, the $30,000. But then you also have the interest on that principal and then the opportunity cost on that interest, right? So that's how that all works together. And that all these two things, the opportunity cost and the interest, those are unnecessary wealth transfers just because of the way that you chose to buy your car. Now, cars are a little tricky right now because of interest rates being so low. And it's really enticing to go out and just get the financing. Now, I'm not saying to do it or not do it. Once again, I'm just talking about principles here. Now, let's look at the average car, $30,000. Interest rate right now. Let's look at average rate of about 4% paid over 5 years. 60 months is 5 years. And let's look at that. This shows you that your monthly payment for a $30,000 car, if you have a 4% interest rate, is $552. The average or the total payment is $33,150, meaning that you paid $3,150 in interest. So that doesn't sound too bad, and quite frankly, it's really not that terrible. If you make sure you do it properly, what I could tell you right now is it's expensive. That interest expense adds up. It certainly does. We're going to show you later in the course how you can maximize the efficiency in which you purchase your cars by creating your own microeconomy and putting yourself in the position of the bank. You wait until the abundance banking module, and we're going to teach you how to create your own microeconomy where you can really, really leverage this. But for this, let's just look at the actual, the X's and O's, the dollars and cents, the expense of the interest, and the long-term ramifications that that has on you. But let's just take a look. If we drop that 4% down to 3%, it drops the costs a little bit, but your monthly payment goes from $558 to $539. That's not world changing. So you can see that $552, I should say, is the payment. Now, what does that look like? Here's why car makers love financing. It's their own business. That's why all the major car manufacturers, all the major auto manufacturers have their own financing program because that's where they make their money. If they broke even on selling their cars, they make money on the financing. So if you could get a 6% rate of return, let's look at the opportunity cost that you'd be paying on your automobiles. Over a 5% or over a 5-year period of time, you're looking at a $4,200, literally a $4,200 opportunity cost on the interest that you're paying, right? Because $3,150 after you get rid of, you've paid that interest over 5 years, the next 5 years, you're looking at a $4,200 interest or opportunity cost over a 30-year period, right? Over, let's say a 30-year period, you're looking at just on that one car, $18,000 of opportunity cost just in the interest you paid on financing that car. It's no wonder that banks love to finance cars. That's where they make all of their money. I shouldn't say all, but most of their money. And it's a big business. And why? Because they understand compounding. Big businesses understand how compounding interest works, and they leverage it in their favor. Once again, we're going to get more into this in greater detail on how to finance your cars more effectively, more efficiently. But the reason I'm showing this module for you here is that, once again, so many people have cars that cost $30,000 and they make maybe their income is $30,000 or $35,000 and they drive a $35,000 car. Why do they do that? I'm going to go back to this. They do it because of this number, this $552 number. A lot of people, if you make $30,000, $35,000, $36,000 a year, well, let's just use $36,000 as an example. $36,000 a year, that's $3,000 a month. For somebody just getting out of college, it's their first job, they don't have a lot of debt, maybe they have some student debt, they're renting a house. $552 doesn't seem like that much money out of their paycheck. It's a sixth of their paycheck, and they're like, you know what? I want a nice car. This is what I'm going to do. They don't realize what they're doing to their long-term financial positioning. And what I want to do is I want to show people that if you're going to do that, if you're going to be in the $36,000 range, you shouldn't have a car that costs more than a third of your income, of your gross income, because what that's going to do is it's going to bring it down to a more affordable $221 payment. In the long-term effect of that cost is going to be negligible. Not only that, you can take that, if you can make the 552 work with that big car payment, my suggestion is take the spread, take the $430 or $330 extra amount of money that you would have paid on the car payment and start saving that, and start building your abundance bank. Once again, I'm going to get into that in the future module in this course. But that's where the power is. And if you can start positioning, you don't have to be just out of college to do this. You could be any age to start implementing these principles. It takes a couple years to start cooking and to start being able to be utilized and leveraged, but there's no better time than now, right? There's that old adage is, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, it's 30 years ago, right? As far back as you could go would be the best time, because that tree would be ready to harvest and bigger and better. It takes a long time for it to grow. But then if you need that tree down the line, when's the next best time to plant it? Well, right now, because if you haven't done it, if you haven't planted that tree, there's no better time than right now to plant it. And so I'm going to say the same thing for this. The best time to start is right out of college, right when you start your career. But if you haven't done this, if you've gone a different direction, if you've had the big, expensive, nice cars, if you've been strapped because you feel your auto payments are too high, I want to encourage you, just scale down, delay gratification for a couple years, literally 2, 3, 4, 5 years, drive a car that's a little less than maybe you've been driving, and you're going to be able to drive cars that are far greater than anything you would have been able to afford if you hadn't delayed that gratification. So that is the importance of financing, and the importance of not financing cars in the standardized way. And once again, in the abundance banking module, I'm going to show you how you can finance cars leveraging your own assets and not transferring that money to the bank, but leveraging your own assets and transferring that money to yourself. So we're going to get into that, but that is cars, and let's move forward. All right, so let's talk a little bit about mortgages now. We've talked a lot about credit card debt and how you finance your car and all that stuff, but the reality is more money is going to go through your house than most people save for retirement. And because of that, how you make sure you handle the finances surrounding your home is the most important financial decision that you can make. And with that, it's imperative that you understand, and taking the time and putting the education into understanding this is maybe the most important thing you can do. So moving into this a little bit, let's talk about the reality is anytime you have that kind of money going anywhere, there's a big potential for major wealth transfers. And right now what people see is they buy a house, they have to pay money to the bank for access to that money, so you pay interest to the bank to be able to borrow money for the mortgage for the house. But what people don't realize is that a lot of times interest rates right now are so low, and it hasn't been this way forever, but where we are in the world right now, you can get such great interest rates on your mortgage that it makes sense to finance your house for a long time. It doesn't make sense like it used to make sense for the 15-year mortgage in your life, because while it used to make sense with higher interest rates, with interest rates as low as they are now, I'm going to get into why. And you should also, I'm going to just say right now, you should watch the Mastering Your Mortgage module, the free week that we included in this. It's an amazing presentation. You should not make any decisions around buying or financing or refinancing or doing a home equity line of credit or anything of that nature with your house without watching the Mastering Your Mortgage module. We're just going to touch a little bit about it on this little presentation here, but make sure you also are aware you get a lot of tax benefits for having a mortgage, especially with the current tax code. And let's just look at an average mortgage here. Average amount financed for a house is about $250,000. We'll say just for this conversation, at 4% interest rate at 30 years. Basically, what does that say? That means you got $250,000 of principal. Well, the reason people want to have a 15-year mortgage is to pay it off faster. Why? They want to avoid their interest expense. In fact, a lot of people that I talk to, when I question if they had the opportunity to pay cash for a house to avoid that interest, they would. And the reason is because the interest is big. Most people know that when you finance a house for 30 years, right now, even at a great interest rate of 4%, you're avoiding $179,000 of interest expense if you could just pay cash for that house. But the problem with that is people are missing the boat. And a lot of times people would pay cash for it and they may have other debt going on in their life. Or a lot of times if people pay cash, they don't have a lot of other debt. But the principle still remains. People might do a 15-year mortgage over a 30 and restrict their cash flow and have other credit card debt and so on and so forth. So they're trying to avoid the interest expense of the $179,000. Now, moving into it, let's look at saying, okay, you're paying 4% on your mortgage. And so where is the happy medium? Like if you could get an investment rate of return of the same 4%, right? You're paying the same interest, or you're paying the same interest on your mortgage as you're receiving as an investment rate of return. What does that look like? Well, if you were to take that person who wanted to pay cash for the house and instead of financing it, well, what happened? If they pay cash, sure, they avoid having to pay this $179,000 of interest, but they lose the opportunity to earn 4%, right? That's the opportunity cost. And so they would wind up having $828,000 that they didn't earn. So essentially, over that 30-year period of time, the $250 plus $179 is about almost $330,000. $828,000 minus the $330,000 is about $500,000, just give or take. So give or take a couple of $1,000, you literally, in the way you finance your house, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett would never make the decision to pay cash for this place because he knows on a net basis he's going to have $500,000 almost more cash in his pocket after 30 years just because he decided to finance his house. The key thing is to understand that being debt-free doesn't mean having no debt. Being debt-free means having more assets than having liabilities. And I believe everybody should be toxic debt-free. Any kind of debt, and I define toxic debt as any type of debt that you're not going to be able to earn more than you pay. And when you take into consideration on your mortgage the fact that you get tax deductions, right? If you're in a 25% tax bracket, you get to deduct 25% of the interest you pay on your mortgage. So your effective interest rate, take 25% off the interest rate. So your effective interest rate on the 4% is actually 3%. You're only paying 3% after taxes. And so that is just stuff that people don't think about. And just in the way that you finance your home over the next 30 years can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars or put you hundreds of thousands of dollars ahead of the game. And that's why it's important to understand the difference between toxic debt and healthy debt like a mortgage. I'm not saying I don't want you to have your house paid off and clear and paid for, but I'm just saying I want you to have enough money in an account earning a guaranteed interest rate higher than what you're paying for, right? Where you're going to have liquidity use and control that money moving forward. So I hope that helps with this. Let's move forward.